I hate to give a backstory, but I realize it's necessary to do so in order to tell about an event I want to share. What I look like or what Stephanie looks like is not important. Use your imagination to fill in the blanks with yourself and the love of your life. Stephanie and I found each other mutually attractive. What sparked between us wasn't based on looks. This story is about love. I'm married to Stephanie. Other people called her Steph, but I never did. I thought it was a beautiful name. She also called me Robert, although everyone else just called me Bob. Our affectionate names for each other were our formal names. That part will become important later. Mobby is astronomy. I like to look at the stars as well as the planets in our solar system. I have an assortment of telescopes. Some people have a lot of guns. Some people have a lot of vinyl records. I have a lot of telescopes. I get new ones, just like anyone who likes the latest version of their favorite things and is eager to get the newest modification. If you had asked me a few months ago if something was wrong in our marriage, I would have told you hell yes. Lately, something seemed off. Stephanie and I had been married for 3 years. We talked about the right time to have kids. We had a wonderful moment when we both decided it was time for 2 months. That's all we talked about. And then suddenly she didn't want to talk about it. Our sex life, which had been crazy with the excitement of having a baby, wasn't back to what it used to be. It became more like a ritual. It wasn't cold. The sex seemed mutually satisfying, but the passion wasn't there. And then 3 weeks ago, the sex just stopped. I assumed it was because of female issues I could never understand, or because she changed her mind. Both of my theories were wrong. I returned after work at my usual time. Nothing really told me what was to follow. There was no strange car in the driveway. There was a stranger's car parked on the street, but I didn't realize it until later. I walked in to see my wife and a man I had never seen on our couch before. Normally, I would call it a couch, but what I saw is the reason I describe it differently. They were sitting together holding hands. This was unusual. Stephanie usually let me know when someone stopped by to visit. I hoped it was some distant relative I'd never met. "Hello, dear? Will anyone be joining us for dinner tonight?" Stephanie said, "Robert, please have a seat. I have something to tell you." I sat down in the chair across from the couch. It was strange, but I didn't realize it wasn't the only strange thing I would have to face. No sooner had I done so than Stephanie spoke again. "Nigel and I have fallen for each other good. That removed all doubt." I was silent for a moment, thinking it over. While I did, she looked at the strange man. She looked at him the same way she had looked at me. Before he was looking at her the same way, there was no doubt that she was telling the truth. I had only one question, so I asked it. "Who the hell is Nigel 3? Said the man I had mistaken for Nigel. "That's me. I know this is awkward for both of you. I'm only here to ease the pain of this exposure. It's painful for her." Apparently, pain relief only meant pain relief for Stephanie. My pain hasn't lessened one bit, so it didn't really help. Stephanie spoke next. "I met Nigel at work. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it just did. I really thought I was being calm when I said, 'How did it just happen?'" Nigel pulled himself together and said loudly, "Don't raise your voice at her. She's an angel." Stephanie looked intently into his eyes and said, "Thank you, Pookie. I'm always here for you, Pookie Hontas." Pookie Pookie Hontas. I was stunned. It was like a concussion. I used to play rugby. So I used that word from experience. What I felt was like a knee to the head. I was completely disoriented. My next words reflected this. I contained my emotions again and said in a calm tone, "Maybe there is a way we could work this out." I've read stories about women who can be in love with 2 people at the same time. There is this romantic story where a woman was in love with 2 men. We should read it together before we make any hasty decisions. Nigel got up from the couch. "Stop yelling at her. Stop torturing this wonderful woman." Stephanie grabbed his arm and sat him back down on the couch. "Thank you for protecting me my night." Then she kissed him a light kiss on the lips that would have meant nothing before, for then she looked at me with a mixture of compassion and sadness. "I can't love 2 men. It's not for me. I can only give my heart to 1 man at a time. I fell out of love with you the same way I fell in love with Nigel. Can't we talk about this? We could go to counseling." Nigel squeezed her hand as she replied, "That would just prolong the pain, Robert. My heart knows what it wants. I still love you, and I always will. I just don't love you the way I used to anymore. Ending the relationship would be the easiest way for both of us, but we were only planning on having kids a few months ago. I don't understand." Stephanie looked at me with all the compassion in the world. That's why I had to do it. I want the children to be conceived in love." Nigel spoke again. "They will be our favorite babies." "Oh, Pookie," she replied. They rubbed their noses gently against each other. I really didn't think they could do anything more disgusting if they tried. I was about to speak when Stephanie looked at me and spoke first. "Robert, I know this is hard, and thank you for being so supportive during what I know is a painful time for you. I'll be back later to get my stuff, and I really hope we can talk as friends." I was still wondering how my calm demeanor was somehow interpreted as supportive while they both got up and walked away. I certainly wasn't supportive of any of it. I assumed they said what they had rehearsed in advance. Nigel got into his car and she got into hers. Of course, it was practical as she had to take her own car. However, I don't think I could have stood to see them leave in the same car together. I always thought I had a very good memory that night. It was more like a curse. I replayed in my head everything Stephanie had said to me over the last 6 months. I'd never heard of Nigel. I had no idea who he was. She'd fallen in love with someone else and had an affair, and I'd never had a clue. How could I have missed it? Surely there were signs, as I mentioned earlier, that something was wrong. Now I could put all these things in context. She had fallen out of love with me, which explained her refusal to have sex. She had completely disconnected me from her bed for the past 3 weeks. I concluded that this was around the time she and Nigel realized their mutual desire. She said she could only have one love at a time. That's when she probably gave him her heart and body. I was still trying to make sense of it all when I got the call from the hospital. Stephanie had been in another car accident. Yeah, another one. Stephanie was always too impatient. A year ago, she rear-ended someone on her way home from work when traffic came to a sudden stop. Physically, she was fine, but emotionally, she was shaken. She lost consciousness when the airbag deployed. She wasn't even hospitalized for. That this time was more serious. He was taken to the hospital because she was unconscious when the EMTs found her. I was told that she ran a red light at full speed and then swerved to avoid an oncoming car. She ended up crashing into the side of a roadside cafe. Apparently, this information came from Nigel. He didn't call me and tell me. Of course, I got that information from the staff. I was still mulling over the information coming down on me when Nigel came up to me. Yes, he was there too. He got there before I did, but I hadn't seen him until then. He didn't express mutual grief or offer what would have been an unwelcome hug. He didn't say anything like hi or let's talk. He just went over what was on his mind. "Bob, I can't see her since I'm not family, you know? She was leaving you for me, so I'd appreciate it if you'd let me in. You have to approve it." Technically, I'm not family, but I am her family. Technically, given that approach, I gave my answer. That was easy. No, it wasn't. If I were you, I'd let her go. I'd want to move on. Let me comfort her. "No, are you really going to be in..." At a time like this, yes, with those words, I turned my back on him and headed for Stephanie's room. He was definitely right. I was being a jerk. I didn't feel guilty about it at all, not one bit. I barely had time to deal with the pain when Stephanie announced she was leaving. I didn't even have time to reach the anger stage seeing Nigel and listening to him. The grief was now replaced with anger. I couldn't lash out at my wife after she was in an accident. So being in towards Nigel at the moment would be fun. Fine, I wanted answers, and I hoped I would get them until I did. Pookie wasn't going to get any closer. The fact that he was feeling pain was something of a bomb to me. At that moment, I was intercepted by Dr. Beller. He looked like a wise and experienced physician. His gray hair reassured me that he was a fountain of knowledge. He told me that my wife probably had amnesia from what he could tell. Otherwise, she was physically fine, as she had been in a previous traffic accident with her head. However, this time was different. Except for soap operas, I had no idea what it really meant. What I had learned from the TV was that I had to hit her in the head again to bring back her memories. I soon realized that soap operas should not be considered a source of medical knowledge. Dr. Beller was very much like a doctor when he explained this to me. She has retrograde amnesia. I didn't realize there were different types. There is also a version called anterograde amnesia. People who have it can't create new memories. Have you ever seen a movie called 50 First Dates? Yes, it's actually a criminally underrated Adam Sandler movie. All Adam Sandler movies are underrated. Well, let's all keep our opinions to ourselves. No point in pissing him off. After all, he was her doctor. So if she doesn't have this kind of amnesia, what kind does my wife have? It's the kind everyone is most familiar with. She can't remember anything. After a certain point, she'll create new memories anyway. Is it permanent? It rarely is. Usually the memories come back. It's extremely rare that they never resurface again. How long does it take for the memory to come back? It varies. It could happen this week. It could take a year. It could take even longer. So at any point, she could just suddenly remember everything. It's entirely possible. It could also be that she starts remembering certain things, but not all of them. She gradually remembers more and more things. So what you're saying is that you really have no idea what's going to happen. That's exactly what I'm saying. Besides, you gotta give Mama's boy another chance. Adam Sandler is a comedic genius. Apparently anyone can be a doctor these days. So much for believing in gray hair. They let me in to see my wife. She was awake and alert and confused. Robert, what's the matter? The doctors tell me I've just been in an accident. I grabbed her outstretched Stred hand and she squeezed mine. I squeezed back. What's the last thing you remember? I was coming home from the office. The car in front of me stopped. But I didn't hit the brakes in time. Her memories seemed to go back to an accident that had happened a year before this. It was before Nigel. As far as I could tell, I also wondered if her memories went back to another accident. Had she had some serious injury then that the doctors hadn't discovered? Or was it a coincidence those thoughts should have been discussed with the doctors another time or not? Right now, I was preoccupied with something else. Stephanie, you had another accident the day you left me. I left you. Why would I ever do that? You told me you were in love with Nigel. Nigel? Who the hell is Nigel? He's someone you know from work. I don't know. Anyone at work called Nigel that was interesting. Either Nigel was new there, or she lied to me about how they met. Look, I don't want to worry you. We can talk about this another time. You can't just drop a bombshell like that and not talk about it. My first thought was, that's exactly what you did to me. There was no point in saying it or coming out to spite her for something she didn't remember. I took the long way out truthfully, with difficulty. I told her the whole story. Just as I had heard it from her, she interrupted me several times and was close to accusing me of lying. She seemed unable to comprehend anything I was saying once again. This is exactly how I felt when she and Nigel confessed their mutual love to me. Earlier that day, she was full of questions that I couldn't help but answer, such as, "Did you cheat on me?" "No, Stephanie, I never did, and I never will. Did you beat me up or something?" Same answer as last time. Then why would I do it for no reason? I kissed her hand. "Stephanie, just come to your senses. We have time to talk about this. I'm glad you're okay." Stephanie was kept in the hospital for a few days while the doctors ran tests. I was there every day after work. So was Nigel. Every time I came in, he'd say something like, "Bob, can we talk?" "No, Bob, you know that." "No." Eventually, Stephanie was allowed to go home. We were both informed of what to expect. Stephanie was fine mentally and physically. Her memories would likely return, perhaps slowly, perhaps all at once. I'd heard that before she had heard it before. In that moment, Stephanie just wanted to go home. I wanted that too. So we nodded and agreed and signed all the forms without reading them just to get the hell out of there. While we were nodding and signing, Dr. Beller mentioned that she could go to work, but her lack of memory might make it difficult for her to perform her duties. He suggested that she might want to find another job in a similar field. I simply said, "Thank you, Dr. Beller, for everything you've done. We want to go home now." 5 minutes later, we did that night. We slept cozily in each other's arms. I didn't want to let her go. It was like having a piece ripped out of me that was suddenly restored. I never wanted to lose it again. I slept more soundly since this whole thing started. When I woke up, we were still entwined. Although I breathed easier now that my beloved was safe under our roof again. That didn't mean I felt completely at peace. From what Dr. Beller had said, it sounded like this situation could change at any time. I wasn't sure how big the window was in which I had to find a permanent solution, but I had a second chance now, and I wasn't going to just waste it doing nothing while the clock ticked. Of course, there were deep philosophical questions to consider. For example, if Stephanie had been able to fall out of love with me once so quickly, did I really want her back? Things like, should I look a gift horse in the teeth? I'd never really gotten into philosophy, so I ignored those thoughts and focused on the task in front of me. I needed to get on off the stage before I could think of anything else. This problem was difficult enough. Stephanie wouldn't think of quitting his job. She loved her job. She was good at it. She called her boss and explained her memory situation. Her boss was sympathetic and welcomed her back. She told her that she would do well. I was kind of supportive of her return, but I still didn't know anything about Nigel. A lot of cheating starts at work from the little. I knew it was the same situation here. It would definitely be a problem if he was actually someone she worked with. If Nigel was a coworker of hers, she would run into him again. If that was the case, there was a possibility that he would get into her heart again. She went back to work despite my excuses. She seemed to be honest with me about how they met. Nigel really was a coworker. Stephanie told me that she received a nice welcome. Everyone seemed to want to do what they could to help her. They were all informed about her memory loss. Only one person made her feel uncomfortable. Nigel, his way of welcoming her back was different. He kept wanting to talk to her alone and kept violating her physical boundaries, which was uncomfortable from a coworker, let alone a stranger. She received many hugs, but Nigel was the only one sniffing her hair. Stephanie told me that she drew boundaries very quickly. He didn't seem to heed the warning. He kept wanting to take her hand or hug her. All of this only made Stephanie angrier. The company she worked for had no policy of no relationships between coworkers. Fortunately for me, it did have a strict sexual harassment policy. I realize I said lucky for me, I still wasn't ready to think lucky for us. Not yet, Nigel was called into an HR meeting, given the usual company lecture on the policy, and told he needed to cease and desist. He was also reprimanded by his supervisor and told he needed to stop hitting on Stephanie. Nigel didn't stop. The first thing he did after being warned was to stand in front of Stephanie in front of multiple witnesses. Instead of speaking, he grabbed her and started kissing her. I assumed he expected muscle memory or something to lead to her kissing him back, rather than the ensuing slap and kick to the groin. Nigel was fired for good reason. That didn't stop him from trying to see her. He showed up in the parking lot at work. He showed up. If she went out to lunch, it got so bad that she got a restraining order against him that did a lot to ease my anxiety that the affair might resume. It's hard to have sex from 500 feet away. I did enjoy seeing my wife's lover suffer. I also enjoyed rekindling the relationship with my wife that I thought we had always had. Stephanie was back for a while, but I knew that could change if the memories came back to her, even if that wasn't the case. Could something in her nature make her suddenly feel the same way about another man? One night I was looking at the stars on my balcony through one of my old telescopes. I did this from time to time because I like to think of myself as Galileo and wanted to see if I could see what he saw. I couldn't draw the conclusions he did, but I wanted to be able to when I was frustrated. I pointed the telescope at the neighborhood as I often did. I'll be damned if I didn't see Nigel in the bushes. Stephanie came out on the balcony and asked what I was looking at. I just told her to look through the telescope. Wow, this is some serious. Should I call the police? Oh no, he wants to see something. Let's give him something to see. What do you mean? I want him to see me making love to you. I want him to know that you're mine. He'll see you and me naked. You told me he's already seen you naked. No, you're the only one who's ever seen me naked. I don't think he's ever seen me naked. Then it's time for him to see it. I want him to see something he can never compete with. Let's let him see something from me that he will never get or see again. Let's show him two people in a love that will never be equaled. Let's talk about the pressure. This should have been hard for me. It wasn't. Her enthusiasm was contagious. Heck, it was hot. It had been years since our foreplay had been this intense. We kissed, stroked each other affectionately, then kissed again and again. At this point, I had no idea if Nigel was still looking at us or not. I hoped he was. I didn't really care anymore. We were both in the present moment, enjoying each other's touches and tastes in a way we hadn't enjoyed in years. Stephanie doesn't make any noise when we have sex. She just makes quiet noises. If she ever speaks during sex, it's usually quiet. One statement's like, "Yes, I talk more than she does. I can say up to 3 words, 'You're beautiful.' Or 'Stephanie, my Stephanie, tonight we're putting on a show.'" Nigel shouted, "No, we have to have our children, our children." Apparently, this was the straw that broke Nigel the camel's back. He chose that moment to burst out of hiding. "Pocahontas, please stop. I love you." At that moment, we were no longer paying attention. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to have an orgasm from the look on her face. She wanted the same thing I can always tell when she's in the moment. She never looks at me. Her eyes look anywhere but at me. Nigel, realizing that his words were barely audible, decided to make a non-verbal statement with an action. This statement was made by breaking our glass door. He really could have just opened the door. It was unlocked. I assumed he wanted without wasting time to find out. Despite what we see in the movies, it seems throwing your body full force into a window pane doesn't leave you unnoticed. Judging by the screams, it seems to hurt as well. Nigel was a hell of a mess. He was halfway in and halfway out, stuck in the frame and struggling to free himself from the glass. I grabbed his arm and dragged him inside. He screamed again. His clothes were torn and his exposed flesh showed lacerations everywhere. Instead of thanking me, he shouted, "Get your hands off me!" I didn't even touch him after pulling him down as he lay prostrate on the floor. He really seemed indifferent to the fact that he was bleeding and stained. The area was tiled, but it would still have to be cleaned up. I called 911 at the time. I thought it was a medical emergency. Nigel looked like he had lost the battle to the chainsaw. However, after talking to the 9911 operator, I realized I was also reporting a crime. I lived in a town where reporting a crime could result in the person reporting the crime being arrested or shot. Let's just call that city Baltimore. It was one of those situations where I could have been handcuffed and spent the night in a cell because the police just arrested everyone at the scene and let the court system handle the incident. 2 police officers arrived. One was a rather large and imposing fellow. The other was a smaller woman. And I got the feeling that you didn't want to mess with her while Nigel and I were told to lie down and keep our heads down. Nigel tipped the scales in my favor again while we were both being handcuffed. He shouted to Stephanie Pookie Haas, "I'm coming back to rescue you." The larger police officer was Officer White Cloud. That was all he and his partner needed to hear. I really hoped that someday he would be promoted and eventually become Chief White Cloud. When the dust settled, the court decided that Nigel had violated the restraining order he was also guilty of breaking and entering. Nigel was going to disappear from our lives for a while. It didn't hurt when Officer White Cloud took the stand where he mentioned Pookie Hontus in front of the most liberal judge that could have presided over the case. Did I mention that the judge was also a woman who hated stalking? At that moment, I wanted to kiss her, but I didn't want to test fate. Nigel went to prison. Oh, not forever. He got a sentence of 2 years and served 3 months. It was still an unexpectedly harsh sentence. He was now a criminal that would put an end to his future. It looked like he finally got the message because there was no more communication from Pookie. That was one problem that could be done away with. But there was still a time bomb bringing back her memories. I selfishly didn't want that to happen, considering how she was thinking about Nigel. Now, I don't think it would be good for her either. Nevertheless, we had to move on, ready for it. I had no doubt that if it ever happened, we would be together. I also had no doubt that it would be a complication we didn't need. That's where my story ends. In my opinion, they live happily ever after. This story is best appreciated as a humorous story, which it should be. However, I realize that some readers will find this story unfinished because the reasons for this novel were never explained. I didn't explain it because I don't know the reasons. I used a collection of real-life experiences to describe Stephanie's thoughts when she decided to leave him. I know this, that just from experience in my own life, as well as talking to women and men, I just fell in love with him, explanation has happened more than once if anyone finds this story incomplete. I already know in my mind what will happen if she regains her memories. It will still be a happy ending that will involve therapy, counseling, and arguments. It was snowing softly, settling in fluffy flakes on the trees. Winter in Utah can be frosty, but not in Salt Lake City here. The thermometer rarely dips below -5, but it snows every winter, even if it doesn't last long at 6 o'clock in the evening. A car pulled up to the house. To tell the truth, today I was not waiting for anyone and wanted to rest a little, to be lazy, to watch something on the box for idiots and drink beer. The guests rolled up the Valley City side of my open parking lot behind the house and turned off the engine. I looked out the kitchen window, a Chevy Silverado, so the father-in-law had arrived, or rather ex-father-in-law. I turned on the coffee maker and went to greet the visitor, wondering what he needed from me on this winter evening. I even wondered if something was wrong with Doris. Maybe she's sick. No, she wasn't. It was Doris herself. Doris Day. Adrian, my ex. It's been 6 months opening the door and seeing my Doris, what it hasn't been for 6 months now. Still, it was good to see her, honestly. We hugged and I helped her take off her coat, shaking the snow off. Should I say I was burningly curious about the purpose of her visit? No, I can't say that. She came to visit. Thank you. What's the big deal? Dory didn't like coffee. It ruined the color of her teeth. And she's God damn it, not again. Oh, come on, she hasn't been at my place for a long time anyway. Doris is an orthopedic dentist and she knows better than anyone I know how to take care of my teeth. I poured orange juice into a glass and set it on the living room table. Then I added plates of croissant and vanilla donuts. Day looked around the living room and probably noticed that nothing had changed since she left. She settled into her chair by the table and sat watching me fidget and smiling. We chatted about the weather, my parents' health, her health, and a lot of other nothing, and I kept waiting for her to finally get to the purpose of her visit. She didn't come to ask about my health, to tell you the truth. After she left, I kept thinking she'd try to get back at me, maybe even shoot me or something. But today, if that's what she wanted, she would have killed me as soon as I opened the door. No, she sat there smiling, genuinely looking me in the face, no aggression whatsoever. I know how to spot that. Well, let's spend some time enjoying each other's company. We've been married almost 5 years. It's been a good life, I can't complain. We've had our moments, but show me a family that doesn't have them. We had this house. It was a nice little house, I'd say brick, with an open parking lot in the backyard. It keeps well cool. In the heat of the summer and warm in the short winter, it has 2 bedrooms in the attic, a spacious living room, and a large basement where a small gym is set up. It's a small plot of land, 1/4 of an acre, but we weren't going to plant maize in this house. We were quite comfortable. We settled in and had guests over. We lived in it, loved it, and enjoyed it. This lodge is a departmental lodge. It belongs to Brinks, and we lived in it without any concern for rent. I had a contract with Brinks, and if I worked there for 20 years, I would automatically own the house. Besides, as a veteran who was in a spot and was wounded, I pay half of the utilities, the state adds the rest. Last year, I changed the soft roof to a metal roof and painted the roof a dark, pale color, practical and beautiful. The old one looked quite unpresentable, and this year I planned to plaster the plinth and paint it beige, but it turned out the way it did. Doris put the glass on the table inside. You're probably wondering why I'm here. Dory, why did you do that? I'm curious about what you came to see me about, but you didn't come. I'm glad you're here. Honestly, you know I've been seeing Noah Foster? I gasped. Dory, are you crazy? Heck, a married man? And he's 10 years older than you? Doris got mad. Harris, he and I just happened to meet and talk. There's no need to get your hopes up. He told me everything. I'm sorry, Dory. I thought I said embarrassed. You thought I was did you? Dory looked me in the eye with defiance. Well, I'm sorry, Dor. I really blurted out the wrong thing, so what did you talk to my boss? About the ex leaned back in her chair and looked at me sadly for a while. He told me the whole story. She continued and explained that you had to do so the way you did. You had to kill him by duty. There was a command investigation. The board reviewed the testimony of the passengers and the stewardess. They reviewed the video footage and concluded that you had to use a weapon. Noah told me everything and that's why I forgive you. I forgive. I grinned sadly. What's so funny? Doris got mad. Well, if you forgive me, then Noah didn't tell you everything, and everything started with an ordinary magnetic key, the blue keychain key Doris had on her necklace. When I asked her what this beautiful key was, she was a little embarrassed and told me a story about a new lock on the entrance to the Salt Dental Wing. It was a lie because I stopped by their hospital on 1000 North Street yesterday. I wanted to sit with my wife at a coffee shop, have lunch, and talk about my new assignment. It'll probably mean I'll have to be out of the house a little more, but it'll be a raise of almost $25,000. Annualized, of course, at the time, your humble servant's annual salary was $72,000 plus an Army disability pension of $32,000. All right, 31,800 greenbacks. I didn't lie that much. Maybe pound 100 isn't that much, but me and my family now have lifetime health insurance, lifetime service at a military commissary that sells the same stuff as regular stores, but at a 50% discount. Oh yeah, I almost forgot, and gasoline at military gas stations for my wife and me at a 50% discount, too. Oh, no, I wasn't a badass Navy SEAL or a thug paratrooper in Iraq. I had a quiet, humble profession as a scout sniper. That's where I got hit by a mortar shell near Njaf. I was lucky to survive, and now I only have a slight limp on my left leg. But I can boast a Congressional Medal of Honor that's not really relevant. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I came home from the war in 10 after being discharged from the war. I was 25 at the time. A month later, I met Doris Day, a quiet, pretty girl fresh out of dental school after medical school at a veterans benefit. Her father, a sports doctor, had convinced her to choose this particular profession. She agreed and did not miss out. I also had the opportunity to get a higher education, but I somehow took it too far, so I had Salt Lake High School and Sergeant Sniper School in the Army under my belt, so we started dating. I don't know why, but she was interested in me. At least that's what she said in August of 2010. Doris, in her white wedding dress, put my wedding ring on my finger. So when I piled into the clinic to see my Doris, she wasn't there. She'd gone to lunch. Nobody knew where she was going. There was no lock on the door to the wing entrance at all. Well, what do you suggest I think about that? That what should I do? There was no point in asking my wife directly about her lies. I wanted the truth, not another lie to explain the first. So I pretended that everything was fine, but vague suspicions began to eat away at my soul. Analyzing our family and intimate relationships lately, I realized a few interesting things. First, our sex life has been in a coma for the past month. Doris was terribly tired at work. She had a headache, she wasn't in the mood, and in fact, she had some kind of thrush. And secondly, this is our new neighbor, Cody Goodman, big guy, former Navy SEAL. Well, that's what he said about himself. Cody rented a little house with a garage across the street from us. And in July, I don't know what July it was, he went around to the neighbors wanting to get to know his new surroundings. He came over to our place, he introduced himself, stood on the porch, and when Dory invited him inside for a cup of coffee, he declined and left. During our brief contact, Cody seemed completely calm and even relaxed. The only thing was he kept twirling his keychain in his left hand, fumbling and rubbing the bunch. It gave away his carefully concealed excitement and uncertainty. It was then that I saw a similar blue-colored magnetic key. I suspected my wife of infidelity. It was bad, it was disgusting. But there was nothing I could do about my suspicions. They were nestled comfortably in my head, and they weren't going anywhere. Something had to be done this coming Saturday. Doris was going shopping, but her Audi's rear left tire had died for some reason. I offered her my GMC for shopping, and she happily agreed. We exchanged keys when Doris drove away. I quickly inflated the flat tire and drove down 1200 West to Anava's Market. I knew there was a shop there that made copies of keys, including magnetic keys. So I had a copy of the strange key in my hands. There was only one thing left to check when I arrived home. I called my wife and inquired, "Darling, when can I expect you?" "Not till tonight, Harris. I met Sandra. You remember her. She invited me over. So I'll see you tonight. Don't miss me." I wasn't going to miss you. I had some errand to run taking the new key. I crossed the road and knocked on our new neighbor door. Then I knocked harder. No one was home. Well, the moment of truth, I applied the new key to the lockbox. It chimed, clicked, and the door opened. The world collapsed. All this I was now telling Doris as a curious episode in my life. Damn it, Harris. You sly snake. I must have looked like an idiot on that trip. Jesus, Dory, why, like you were a fool in love. You've been so careless about your affair, I can't believe it. But you know that's not all. Let me make some calls, okay? Da was surprised, but she nodded in agreement. Then I dialed the chief's home number. Noah, I'm sorry to bother you. It's okay, Harris. What did you want from the old man? Noah, please tell me if the Tristan Wright case is still classified or if it's been declassified. I'll find out, and I'll call you back. All we have to do is wait a little longer. What does this have to do with Tristan? Dory was worried. Wait a couple minutes later. Noah called back. Harris, the case has been declassified. Why would you do that? Doris is here to see me, and I want to fill her in on the details. You know, she met with me once, and we talked about the story, but I didn't give her the details, thanks, Noah. You helped me out. I turned to Dory. Well, darling, you're ready to hear a sad story, only it's a little boring. It's about you and me. Da said it's about you and me and Cody Goodman and Tristan Wright. Doris squinted wearily. Well, tell me about it. And I did. Our late loving neighbor's real name wasn't Cody at all. His name is Tristan Wright. And he's not a paratrooper. He wasn't even in the Army. He's a lone gunman last time. 8 years ago, he robbed a cash truck from Phoenix to Kansas City. The boys were carrying 450 pounds of dilapidated bills. The collection was handled by Loomis, and they screwed up. Worn money is carried in a regular airplane, only in a special compartment. They're escorted by 2 collectors. Tristan took a ticket on this plane and carried a parachute bag into the cabin. No one asked him anything about his somewhat odd carry-on backpack. The metal detector detected nothing on the flight to Mizzou. Tristan stabbed 2 million, and he was never found 4 and A2 the 000 acres of old-growth forest where was he to be found. Anyway, he's gone. He's probably got a safe house out there somewhere, probably with a car, or he walked. Now, I guess the poor guy must have gotten a little worn out after 8 years he enjoyed robbing and decided to do it again, except we have federal facial recognition now, and then there's his marvelous robotic portrait with 5 witnesses. He was meticulous in his preparations. It was important to him to know when I was flying out to Missouri, where we have 2 federal banks. So he controlled me through you. He found out that Brinks was moving money out of Salt Lake, and I'm in charge of getting the money bags from airport to airport. He needed to know the day and time of my flight. He could easily determine the flight number from the terminal schedule. Doris sat there with her mouth open, and I went on, Dory, when he was arrested. I asked him, did you have to ruin my marriage over such trivial information? I mean, he could have gotten it some other way. He said it's more interesting that way. X sat there with a pained look. She sighed convulsively. He did say that I interrupted. I know what he told you. He was being led by the FBI, and there were bugs and cameras all over the apartment. They showed me the porno movies they made of you. God. Dory moaned. They saw everything. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Then she jumped up. You knew advance that Cody was lying to me and did nothing. How could you do or, honey, listen to me when I found out whose key you had? I got a call that night and was invited into the chief's office. There were 3 FBI sitting there and they got me. They asked me what I was doing at the intruder's door. I explained they didn't believe me, but in the end, I managed to convince them that I wasn't involved in the robbery. That's when they told me all this. I looked at Day with pity. The thing is, at that point, everything had already happened. The marriage had broken down and couldn't be repaired. You had become a stranger. I was asked to hold back information, not to get hysterical, and to hold off on the divorce, which I did at my request. I was shown several pornographic videos starring you and Cody. I know he promised to marry you and take you to the Philippines, but he lied about everything, Dory. Everything he told you was a lie. There was a couple of million or 2 at stake, and he went for it through mangled fortunes and dead bod. So you got off easy. He could have killed you in cold blood as an unwanted witness. So we left International Airport at 4. And had to arrive at Wheelersport by 5:30. When he got up from his seat in the cabin, the whole group realized that it had begun. I got up to stop him too, because access to the back of the plane during the transportation of valuables is forbidden, and this was announced over the selector stopping in front of me. Tristan pulled out a plastic dagger and tried to stab me. He didn't know the cabin was packed with FBI agents. 8 men, professional wolfhounds. He was shot in the shoulder. Shot in the shoulder is an understatement. Expansive bullets shattered his joint. I didn't even have to do anything. Doris put her hands over her face. Still, she loved the geyser, and it was hard for her to imagine him suffering. I continued. He was handcuffed. And given first aid, I asked permission to sit next to him and talk to him, and I was allowed to. That's when he told me that you for sport. He also said he didn't want to kill me. He said we 2 soldiers could have worked it out. It's a pity. He said that we were interrupted. I grinned. Warriors, he wanted to make a deal with me by my wife. He was never in the service, bastard. Harris, you're telling a scary story. Dee said in a trembling voice. It's like I'm in another life. I never thought it could be like this. You can't do that to a man. You can't do that to a woman. I mean, I loved him. Okay. Now tell me how you killed him. Dory, this is hard. I want the satisfaction of knowing he's dead. Oh my God, what am I saying, Harris? You just destroyed me. Okay. She breathed in and out quickly to calm herself down. Talk to me, I'm listening. I did. He asked to go to the bathroom, and I volunteered to go with him. Where would he go from the airplane? Right. So he sat down on the toilet seat, and I put my spare Browning revolver in his lap. Last argument, I bought it offhand, and it's not registered anywhere. I always carried it in a holster on my shin. That day, I just slipped it behind the cuff of my sock. I looked sternly at Dory and asked, Dee, do you realize that I'm telling you now about my crime, and if you go to turn me into the police, I'll recant everything and present it as your fiction? She wiped away her tears. Harrison, I swear on my life, I swear on my mother's health that I won't hurt you. Dor jumped up and rushed to me, holding out her arms. Harry, my poor Harry. I pulled away, pushing her. Embrace away. Don't, Dee. I'm not poor at all. I'm a fool. I forgot about you. I didn't realize how much you were suffering. Look, darling. It's all in the past. Don't worry so much. It's good that it happened. Now we're young, childless, and still able to find our soulmate in this world. We sat in silence, staring at the tabletop between us. I remembered when I told my wife the news I'd gotten back from a flight late at night. The alarm clock in the bedroom read 2:14, as I remember it now. I woke my wife up. "Doris, wake up, we need to talk." "Are you crazy, Harry?" "I'm asleep, I have to get up early tomorrow, darling, this can't wait." The wife went to the bathroom, yawning and scratching. She came back, sat on the bed. "So, darling, what's so super important you want to tell me? Sure, I know about you and Cody." Doris was not discouraged. She gave a heavy, sad sigh and said, Well, you would have found out someday anyway, Harry. I'm going to divorce you. I've fallen in love with someone else and I'm leaving you. I'm sorry, no, Dora, you can't go to him because I killed him." How the wife gasped with a gun. 3 wounds incompatible with life, and that's when Doctor lost consciousness. I didn't do anything. I felt my wife, she's breathing, she's got a pulse, so it's no big deal. I went to the second bedroom, locked myself in there, and fell asleep without undressing or making the bed. In the morning, I got up late, about 10 o'clock. Doris had already left. A lot of her things were gone, and I assumed that she had gone to her parents' house, and from there to work. By the evening of the next day, I had finished dividing up our money. I divided everything fairly in half. Our salaries were about the same. I have a little more, so $5,050, it's conscience. 3 days later, her parents, Jock and Misty Day, arrived. They're great guys, and I didn't want to upset them at all. I put a bottle of red wine on the table, some delicacies, and a jug of apricot juice. In short, I tried to be as hospitable as possible. Finally, they came to the main event. Jock entered. "Harris," he began, "our daughter says she's left you, that she can't live with you, that she hates you, but she won't tell us what happened. Maybe you can fill us in. Did you cheat on her, or did you hit her or insulted her in some way, Dad?" I said I didn't do any of those things. "Well, thank God," Misty exclaimed, "so it can still be fixed. Sheck, get over it and come back to you." "No, Mom, she's not coming back to me. My lawyer's already busy drawing up the divorce agreement." Misty gasped, flailed her arms. "Oh my God, what the hell happened to you guys? I shot her lover. She's going through a lot. Don't let her get discouraged. Don't let her get discouraged." Jacques is worried. "Harris, why did you do it? You'll go to jail." "No, Jacques, they won't. It was done clean," and the father-in-law and mother-in-law left in a state of total confusion. Doris finally died after I talked to Noah. I felt strange, like I'd lost something important and precious, and after what you told me, I'm in limbo. Our roles have reversed. Now you're the good guy and I'm the bad guy, and I don't know what to do. I shrugged. "Dor, you don't have to do anything special. Just move on with your life. Find a good man, get married, have kids, move up the career ladder. It's simple." And then she came out. "Harris, let's start over." "What do you mean?" I was surprised. "Let's start dating, become friends." I interrupted Dory. "We're not enemies as it is. No, we need to become friends with benefits. Do you understand? Maybe we'll realize the need to become husband and wife again later. I'm sorry, Dor, but I'm not ready for remarriage, so no. The ex is in a hurry." "Wait, Harry, don't be in a hurry. Remember, we were good together." "Well, think about it. I've already thought about it, darling. Now think about it. Why would you want a husband you don't love and who will cheat on you all your life?" Doris froze in shock. But why, what made you think you'd be an unloved husband?" I just shrugged my shoulder. "ERS, I'm not going to lecture her about my feelings. It's not about her, it's that I'm going to think that. And why would you cheat on me for the rest of my life? Would you want to hurt me as much as I hurt you?" "No, I don't want to hurt you. I'll cheat on you probably because I don't feel obligated to be faithful to you." We were silent for a moment. Then Doris got up to leave. "Come with me, darling." She put on her coat, hugged me, and said goodbye. "I'll think about what you said. I'll try to find the strength to accept your cheating, and I'll try to find my way to your heart." And she left. I didn't tell her I was in a close relationship with my widowed neighbor. I mean, hell. Doris knows what she's up to, right? And Ruby has 2 kids, and she's in dire financial straits. She's struggling, pulling her boys through, and if I'm not going to marry her yet, I'm not going to leave her to her fate. There's a lot I'd like to do for her, and I gotta tell you, Ruby is 10 points ahead of my ex-wife in bed. So you know what I mean. So let Doris think all she wants, but it's not going to get us anywhere.